Okay, let's turn and look at tort liability. Our question here is, when is the principal liable for torts committed by the agent? So here we're going to use same characters for a basic setup. Ajit and Paula have entered into an agency relationship. At Paula's direction, Ajit goes to the helicopter store and while driving there, injures someone. Imagine Ajit did it negligently. Ajit is liable under principles of tort. The question we're interested in as a agency law matter is whether Paula is liable in addition to Ajit, because Ajit is Paula's agent. The agent committed a tort is the principal liable for it. So again, the issue at a conceptual level is, can we hold the principal accountable for something the agent does with a third party? The answer is going to depend on the level of control that the principal has over the agent. In analyzing the degree of control, the second restatement, we're looking here on the slide at the third restatement, but let me just mention the second restatement, drew a distinction between what it termed, on the one hand, the master-servant relationship, and on the other hand, the independent contractor relationship. The third restatement here, using different terminology, which I prefer, draws a distinction that for our purposes is identical. This is between agents that are employees on the one hand and non-employees on the other. An employee, under the third restatement, is an agent whose principal controls or has the right to control the manner and means of the agent's performance of the work. If the principal does not have control over the manner and means of the agent's performance of the work, then the agent is not an employee agent. The agent is a non-employee agent. The terminology here I want to emphasize comes with a major pitfall. The employee test under the third restatement here is all about control. It has nothing to do with whether the agent is paid for the work, and being paid for the work may be a common thing that springs to mind when you're thinking about the word employee. But someone you wouldn't call an employee in everyday language because they're not paid might still be an employee agent under the third restatement. The third restatement says the fact that the work of the agent is performed gratuitously for free does not relieve a principle of liability if the agent is an employee agent. So all we care about here is control. And this categorization, employee agent or non-employee agent, matters for tort liability. The principal is liable for the torts of an employee agent who acts within the scope of the agent's authority. So when you read the gas station cases, the gas companies are arguing that the station owners are independent contractors. That's the issue. That's what the fight is about. And when they're doing that, they're arguing about precisely this same legal issue, albeit in the terms used by the second restatement. Agency law makes the principal liable for the torts of the employee agent, or we'll say vicariously liable for the torts of the employee agent when that agent is acting within the scope of employment. If the agent is not an employee agent, then the principal is not liable for the torts. But is the principal liable? It depends on whether it's an employee or not. Is it an employee agent or not? It all depends on the control over the manner and means of the work. So we said control is what matters for tort liability. Why should that be so? What is the normative justification for this distinction? Why would the law bother saying control matters when we're talking about tort liability? There are two distinct justifications, and they may be familiar from torts, depending on how long ago you took torts. Maybe you remember this kind of thing, maybe you don't, but let me give you two quick glimpses of them, two views of why control should matter. The first comes from the famous treatise by Prosser and Keaton on torts. And it says liabilities are placed upon the employer because having engaged in an enterprise which will, on the basis of all past experience, involve harm to others through the torts of employees and sought to profit by it, it is just that he, rather than the injured plaintiff, should bear them. The principal is liable here, Prosser and Keaton are saying, because that's the fair outcome. The second normative justification is an efficiency-based argument from Judge Posner. The reason for distinguishing the independent contractor from the employee is that by definition of the relationship between a principal and an independent contractor, the principal does not supervise the details of the independent contractor's work and therefore is not in a good position to prevent negligent performance. So this is a version of an argument about who is in the best position to avoid these harms, who is the cheapest cost avoider, a term you might recall from torts. And Posner's saying there's no point in making the principal liable for a harm the principal doesn't have the power to control. If the principal is not in a position to control whether or not the agent takes additional precautions, then there's no social benefit to making the principal liable. It's not going to change the amount of harm in the world. Again, that's a separate, distinct argument from the one you get from Prosser and Keaton. To see the boundary line between control and no control, we'll examine the two gas station cases when we meet in person. Okay, that's all for tort liability.